the UAW. And people like in other unions like Gus Scholl, who became president of the Michigan, who was president of Michigan CIO. It was a wonderful combination. Manon Williams built trust. He built trust in our system of government, whether it was with auto workers or it was with ethnic, Polish, German, Italian, with the black community, African American community, with liberals, intellectuals, and many business people. But basically, his strength flowed out of what we don't have today, is this confidence that through the electoral process, through the election to public office, of people you could trust with the programs, implementing programs they campaigned on, was key to all of this was Manon. And it was a wonderful, exciting period in the 50s and the 60s.
Now, how about the role of precinct delegates in that 48 election? I know you're very familiar with it.
Well, 48, I wasn't that active. Yeah. No, I'd been elected precinct delegate, come to think of it, in 1946. Because we lived in Herman Gardens then. A couple of people came over that morning and said at the breakfast table, we're going to write Millie in today for precinct delegate. That was before that was when the Democratic Party was still controlled by people of very limited vision, conservatives. But I worked mostly just in my precinct. Yeah. By 1948, though, we did 48, I don't recall all of this, but I know that we did, Josephine Hunsinger was a UAW person, a woman from, later became a member of the legislature and was then GMD. So Josephine and I and several other women went to Martha Griffiths and asked her to, suggested that she run for the state legislature. And at first Martha said no, she had to work for Menon. That was her contribution in the 48 campaign. But then she decided to run and Martha was elected. Yeah. And that was her first elected office, which led to her becoming a member of the United States Congress.
Yeah, let's go on. This is maybe some of the dark side of our politics. Now, I'd known Martha, we were in college together, Martha and Hicks, that certainly she took the lead in Congress on civil rights. Then at some point, and I'm not too familiar, because I wasn't so active then, the 17th endorsed somebody against her for Congress. Were you?
Well, that was one of our mistakes, just one time. And she was elected in 1954, and in 1956, the 17th Congressional District endorsed her opponent in the primary. That was one of our young juvenile mistakes.
I remember Ted Bond and I tried to meet with Martha and heal that, and we were not successful, but
well, Martha
I guess those mistakes, everybody's entitled to one. The other was a hassle, the conflict on 17th District Chair between Al Myers and Mike Lacey. Does that
I
ring a
have
bell
no
at
recollection of that at all, Tom. Absolutely no recollection.
I mean, the things were vigorous those days.
Well, the reason I have no recollection is because, by and large, with our state party chair, Al Myers, with Johnny Tuccio, who was the chair of the UAW group. There were many different caucuses in the 17th District. It was vibrant and dynamic and argumentative, no question about it. That was the times.
You want to mention some of the other
But we all worked together so well, and Mike Lacey was very important, and I have no recollection of what you're talking about. Absolutely none.
Let's go on. Do you know some other labor people other than UAW? Certainly the UAW ones were very active. I think
the postal workers, the firefighters.
Yeah.
Were very, in the 17th District, of course, was a fabulous district, Tom. Yeah. You know that. Yeah. I mean, we had Adelaide Hart, we had Helen Berthelot, and we had Ted Bond, and we had George Bowles, and you could name some more. Yeah. We had great talent in the 17th District.
And what I think was so good.
And I can't think of his name right now, the postal workers, letter carriers, became president of Jim, can't think of his last name at the moment, became president of the National Letter Carriers Union. So we were very diverse, and we had the academics and the intellectuals as well as the working people.
I think, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, Millie, but
oh, come on, you can do that.
Well, you could chat, but when Walter was talking about realignment of political forces,
Oh, yes.
I think in the 17th, and to extend in the party, it was UAW, Michigan CIO, AFL, Teachers Union, and
Teachers Union,
in
yes.
addition, the ADA, the general liberal community,
Right.
People like Ted Bond, who later became a circuit judge, people with general liberal orbit were pulled in there that normally had not wanted to bother with politics.
And of course, one of our prominent members was John B. Swainson.
That's right.
And it was the 17th District who promoted John first. I remember that so well. We had a Senate seat coming up, and I remember we talked about it, and you may remember, we can win this race.
Yeah.
Then we said, but who will our candidate be? Yeah. And I can't remember whether I know Johnny Tuccio was there and others, and you and others. And so we he was active in the district, but here was a World War veteran, an amputee, who'd been very active in the Veterans Association, John B. Swainson. We elected him state senator, where he worked with Bill Milliken. Do you remember? Bill Milliken was then in the Senate, and they were the Turks. Those two worked together. They were a great combination for progress in our state, a Republican and a Democrat, and then lieutenant governor and then governor. Yeah.
Well, just another point on your interest in women's participation. The old 17th, before we got active, met in a bar, which I think kind of discouraged women from participating.
Yes, that's right. I'd forgotten that.
Then we met in the Carpenters Hall, very nice union hall. And then Adelaide Hart got a fashion show that got and I know you or others got women really involved in the district very actively.
Adelaide exemplifies in so many ways the spirit of the times and the kind of open participatory party we had. Adelaide was a school teacher, and a Catholic, and her faith meant a great deal to her. And I, having been raised as a Catholic at my early life, you learned compassion and caring, and that you were part of humanity. Yeah. And Adelaide was absolutely zealous. She really didn't want to compromise. And I can remember Adelaide, Adelaide is a little taller than I, but standing next to Menon Williams, shaking her finger in Menon's face. For example, maybe it was on something mental health or whatever her cause, or education.
What Adelaide was so good, she would she'd shake her finger at Menon, say your staff's giving you cotton batting, and she would tell him, and he would listen.
Oh yes, Menon would listen, no question about it. Yeah. The other thing quickly about Adelaide, and I know you have a tape of her, but Adelaide went up and down this state. Now her job was, as vice chairman, was women. Yeah. So she would work in county after county with women in the county, but also with the county chair, but always advancing the equality, whether women, minorities, ethnic groups, but always building the party in the image, and we were a liberal party. Yeah.
Well, and I think you and Adelaide, people like that, really got women participate. How about
Adelaide particularly?
How about racial participation in the Michigan Democratic Party? What was done there to involve ethnic groups, African Americans, and so on?
Yeah. Well, I remember. I think that Menon, as I said earlier, he developed such trust. I recall when Menon Williams endorsed John F. Kennedy in June of 1960 at Mackinac Island, very dramatic thing. And when I came back to Detroit that night, the next morning I started calling leaders in the black community. Didn't have to call so many in those days, and they were so angry because Menon Williams was their candidate for president. And there were the Damon Keys, and there were the Bill Patricks, and there were just dozens of doctors, dentists, funeral parlor owners, as well as UAW people. But it was across the leadership, at least, of the black community, plus in the great numbers of people, this trust and faith and belief in Menon Williams and what he stood for, which meant in their minds he was a true fighter.